Welcome. Welcome to Reform Perspective. I have in the studio today, name Bryce, Mr. Bryce Bussert. Welcome, bro.
Good morning. Thanks for
doing?
having me.
You doing all right, man?
Yeah, doing good.
I'm digging the stash.
I grew out the stash before I moved out here, partly because I figured I'll become a seminary student. Odds are I'll end up working with youth.
Yeah.
And it'll help me not look like I am a youth if I grow out the stash.
Yeah. Well, when you first got here, you didn't have it, right?
No, I did.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
But it wasn't that glorious.
I've been growing out more recently because for Christmas, my wife actually gave me some mustache wax. So I was like, I got to grow it out a little more so I can start using the wax a little bit.
Yeah. Are we going to do the twirl at the end eventually?
Yeah, I haven't decided yet. Okay. I have to play with it.
Dude, I've tried to grow out the stuff. First of all, my wife hates it. She hates the feeling of the mustache, so I can't really let it grow too long. But then once it starts growing, I don't get like a nice form to it. Like It doesn't form right. And then I look Mexican.
Nothing could be worse than that.
Oh, man. Well, I'm glad you're jumping on, man. Part of the reason why I wanted to bring you on is just so I can get to hear your story. And also I know that you're passionate about languages. You know, I took Hebrew last semester and it looked like you already have it down really well. And so I'm kind of jealous of that, of the fact that you already have this language down. So where are you from originally?
So I'm from North Georgia. I grew up about an hour north of Atlanta. Small, rural, right near the carpet capital of the world in Dalton, and a lot of poultry, so a lot of chickens.
How far away is that from Columbus, Georgia?
So I'm a couple hours north of Columbus.
Okay.
Not too far. I went to school for a little while in the central part of Georgia, which was a little over an hour from Columbus.
Okay. Yeah, the only reason I know Columbus is because Fort Benning is there. So when I was doing my basic training at Fort Benning and then airborne school, that was it.
Yeah.
It's muggy. It's disgusting.
Yep. Humidity.
But the state's beautiful.
Oh, I love Georgia.
Like the states, the trees there, they're beautiful. So I have nothing really negative to say other than that it gets really hot and humid.
Yeah, I miss the green. Out here, everything is like, I call it brown. My wife calls it golden.
Golden State.
But it's that and blue because the sky and the ocean.
That's right.
But when I go home, it's green.
Yeah.
Like the mountains come up, the trees, the grass. It's just a lot of green.
And so how did you grow up there your whole life, basically?
Basically, I was born in North Dakota, but I've been in Georgia ever since a little before my second birthday.
Okay, so you don't remember anything from North Dakota.
Yeah.
Okay. Have you ever been back before?
Yeah. So my parents separated, and my dad lived in North Dakota for a little while after I moved back to Georgia. So I have a couple memories of going back to visit him when he was there.
Yeah.
But not long after that, he moved to North Carolina. And so I would spend summers there, but not that much different from Georgia.
Where at North Carolina?
They were in Waxhaw. So
Waxhaw?
Waxhaw. Yeah.
I've never heard of it. I lived in North Carolina. I was stationed in Fort Bragg. So
there you go.
Fort Bragg, North Carolina, over there, Vietnam is what most people call it. Yeah, Vietnam.
That's good.
And then I bought a house in Rayford for a little bit. So I'm familiar with like the Raleigh-Durham area, but I'm not familiar with any other.
So it's right across the border from South Carolina and south of Charlotte.
Okay.
And it's the reason they moved there is my grandparents worked with JARS. They handle the logistical and transportation side for Wycliffe Bible translators.
Oh, okay.
And so the JARS stands for Jungle Aviation and Radio Service, and their headquarters is in Waxhaw. So it's a small town.
Okay.
They get a lot of flight hours, and they don't have air traffic that they have to deal with, so it works out well for that.
Sweet. Awesome. So did you grow up in the church your whole life, or did you eventually get to a point where you started attending church?
Yeah, so I've been going to church my whole life. Both of my grandfathers have been involved in ministry in sort of a vocational capacity.
In the South as well, or in Dakota?
So my grandfather on one side has been doing children's evangelism and ministry in the South, in Georgia. Okay. We moved there sort of to be with them.
Yeah.
And then my other grandfather was a missionary with Wycliffe as a pilot and mechanic, and so they spent a long time in Colombia in South America doing a translation project. And so he was flying people around doing logistics. And then when they finished up that term, they came back, moved to headquarters, and he's run safety, their aviation safety for them. So he traveled internationally a lot, doing aviation safety programs, trainings, audits, accident reports, but involved still raising support, traveling around, writing letters, doing that sort of stuff.
Okay. So you've been kind of like around ministry things your whole life.
Yeah. My mother played
Grandparents
piano
and
in our
stuff.
church
Okay.
growing up, so
Yep.
we were there all the time.
Yep.
And I had like people involved in ministry in different other capacities in more vocational context.
Okay. So when did you sense the Lord calling you into the ministry? Like when did you start experiencing that?
So I was getting ready to do some dual enrollment. So instead of my last 2 years of college, I did a dual enrollment program. I moved 3.5 hours away, lived in a dorm, took college classes.
A dual enrollment where?
It was at Middle Georgia State University. And Georgia had a deal where if you're dual enrolled, the state pays all your tuition.
Okay.
And so most people could take 1 or 2 classes, but there was one particular program where we were full-time college students. We lived in a dorm, a much more intensive program. So I got my associate's degree actually in Spanish 2 weeks before.
Órale.
Yeah,
Not that
before I
kind
got
of
my
Spanish,
high
real
school
Spanish.
degree.
Not slang Spanish, not orale Spanish, but probably more proper Spanish.
My friends used to aggravate me about el lunche all the time. I'd come home and they go, ¿Has comiste el lunche? And I was like, do not say that to me.
That's hilarious, man.
So I was getting ready to do the dual enrollment program, and I was looking at getting a job to raise some money to help pay some of the other bills.
yeah.
And I started selling clothes at Polo Ralph Lauren in the outlet mall.
Okay. Yeah.
And God had been doing some other stuff in my life, but I really became aware of it actually when I started working at Polo because I loved that job. I couldn't figure out why. And one day it hit me. I said, like, my job description is just help people. Like, and I spent all day helping people find a shirt or pants or a pair of socks. But it was so rewarding to me to do even those little things.
Excuse me, sir. Will these socks fit you?
And I just,
And that just made you happy.
My shift would end, and I would be like, "Can I stay?" Like I was having so much fun, and I couldn't figure out why. And I finally realized, I think I really enjoy that. And I got to heard people say, I want to go into nursing because I like to help people, and I were like, that's not me. But I realized that once I was working with the public and doing that kind of thing, and so then I sat and I thought, well, this is nice. I enjoy this, but if I'm going to think about a career long term, I like helping people in more meaningful capacities than just helping them find socks.
Okay.
And so when I thought about my own life, I thought, who is the people that have helped me the most? And without a doubt, it was the pastors I'd had. And I thought, those are the people who helped in the moments where I needed it the most, and they had the most significant input, and really have shaped my life in the most meaningful ways.
Yeah.
And that had sort of come along with, that was really my desire catching up to some other things that God had been working on me for a little while. I had been giving up my plans and giving up part of control of my life as God worked on me to just give up and say, all right, God, what you want me to do is what I'll do.
Yeah.
But I didn't have a desire to do anything really particular through that. It was through this other job that I realized, man, I love getting to do this.
So in like serving others at this clothing job, you were just you recognizing that you enjoyed serving others. And so then you connected, who served me the best? How can I serve in that capacity? And you're like, the church, obviously.
Absolutely. So I called up my pastor and I said, hey, can I follow you around? And
Dude, that's so important. Me and Taylor just talked about this like last week. We were just talking about like how important it is to voice. Just telling your pastor, hey, can I learn from you for a little while just to get to know what you're doing?
Absolutely. And he was great. And I had summers off and different breaks and different things. And especially when I started to do enrollment, I had even more flexible schedule. And so he said, listen, I'll give you every Monday. And you and I will hang out on Mondays. We'll go to the church. We'll talk through some stuff. We'll read some books. We'll look at records. And then there was a pastor's meeting, and he said, you'll come along and meet the other pastors, and you can talk to them and ask them questions. Yep. And then we'll go visit people who are sick in their homes, go to the hospital, and I'll just bring you along. Yeah. And we did that, and I just loved it. I soaked up every minute of it. And then before long, I was praying with people at work
Yep.
who were coming in to buy a shirt, and they're stressed because they got a wedding, and they're like this crazy stuff. I have an estranged relationship with my daughter, but now I'm going to be walking her down the aisle at the wedding. I need a shirt, and like I can find you a shirt, and like also we'd stop and pray about it.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And it was just a wonderful way to get that unusual experience.
I mean, I was going to say you would never think you'd be able to do ministry in a clothing department. How insane is that?
Yeah.
But if you're going to be called to the ministry, you're going to do ministry wherever it is, right? So
Yeah.
That's awesome, man.
Yeah.
So after you've earned your associates in Espanol, you got some Spanish in you. Is that what really because you like languages?
I do.
You like languages. I don't know why you like languages. But is that where it kind of started, like your love for learning languages and studying languages?
Yeah. So throughout this part of this process, I was giving up control of my life, and giving up is maybe a strong word. God was God was revealing the illusion of control I had over my life.
Yeah.
But I was trying to figure out, well, how do you prepare for doing anything? Like, how do you try and prepare for God might ask you to do who knows what?
Yeah.
And so the only thing I really had to go on was I'd been told, well, every language, the first language you learn is the hardest. Right? And then the second, and they get easier the more you've done.
Yeah.
And I said, well, if God is going to ask me to do anything, the odds are that it only requires English are relatively low. That might not be the case. So how do I prepare for learning any language? Mm-hmm. Well, I'll start by learning just a language. And my grandfather grew up and worked flying around linguists who did Bible translation projects.
Yeah.
And I always loved planes. I wanted to be an engineer. I wanted to design and work on planes. And I realized, well, maybe I need to switch and do linguistics as preparation for learning a language if God uproots me and says you need to go to Romania or someplace. And so I took one semester of Spanish at high school before I went off for my dual enrollment program, and I loved it. I had so much fun. And so when I was there, I said, I'm going to do my Spanish program. I'm going to focus on that, and that'll learn something useful. It'll get me practice in learning languages. And quite frankly, it was the closest thing I could get to linguistics anywhere.
Yeah.
There's like one, maybe two schools in Georgia that teach linguistics. And that's really, I wanted to study that. And so that was a way to get started on that.
mean, I'd be surprised if linguistics was a big topic in Georgia, so
yeah.
Makes sense to me. So, okay. So that's where it's kind of started. And then after that, did you end up, because you earned a bachelor degree,
yeah.
right? What was the name of the university you went to?
Yeah, so I got my associate's degree. 2 weeks later, I graduated high school, and then I went to Swarthmore College in the Philadelphia area.
So, from my understanding, this is a nice college, right?
Yeah.
For the bourgeoisie. No, I was kidding.
So
yeah.
I was looking for a place where I could do linguistics, and I also had virtually no money. And so there was a number of schools that at the time, if your family was under a certain amount of income, they would basically pay for the whole thing.
Oh, sweet.
Out of need-based financial aid.
So there's a benefit to being poor.
It does come around every once in a while. And that was a perk.
So essentially you were poor enough to go to a nice school.
Absolutely. So there was a short list, and I said, how many of these places cover all of the financial costs without loans? That was my preference. And how many of them cover linguistics? And that was my application list, basically.
Yeah.
And praise God, I got in. There's a whole other story about financial aid and all that other good stuff, but I had to sign and pay my deposit that I would go before I got a financial aid offer because paperwork got delayed.
Yeah.
And it was, at the time, it was $75,000 a year that I signed that I would pay.
Man,
and I was like,
indentured servitude for the rest of your life.
It was terrible. When they announced, my high school did a thing where they announced the financial aid scholarship, and they extrapolated it out for all 4 years. And I had never heard the number, how much financial aid it would be over a 4-year period.
Yeah.
And I was like, whoa, that's a crazy amount of money.
Yeah. Especially for somebody who is aspiring for the very lucrative position of minister.
Yeah. Yeah. And I was like, I don't have any money, and I don't anticipate having any money. So this is paying for school was not very much of an option.
This is kind of going off a tangent, but I'm always surprised at how faithful the Lord is for ministers who want to be trained and equipped for the kingdom of God, most people are poor and stay poor or stay relatively on the lower side of income, serving in the kingdom, serving in the church. And it's just, I always hear these testimonies, and it always just blows my mind. Like, I shouldn't be able to do any of this either.
Yeah.
You know, I grew up in a relatively lower middle class family with 5 brothers and sisters, you know, and my dad, who was an immigrant from Mexico. So I definitely understand that journey, bro. And the only reason I was able to is because I had to give 5 years of service to the Army, but nevertheless, there was a benefit to it. But that's cool. So you went to Swarthmore, and you got your bachelor's in linguistics. Is that what it is? Or is there a particular language that you took?
So it was linguistics.
Okay.
I had a double major in linguistics and classics. Once I got to Swarthmore, I had spent a fair number of years of my life planning to study linguistics and hadn't actually done any of it. So I called my mother after like the first week of my first linguistics class. I took syntax, and I told her, and I was like, "Mom, great news. I actually like it." Like for the last 4 years I've been talking about, I think I really want to do linguistics.
So
I
funny.
picked my college because it had linguistics, but I hadn't actually done any. So I got there and I loved it.
That's awesome.
Got to do a bunch of that. And then accidentally, I sort of had planned I'll eventually go to seminary, do ministry preparation, do pastoral work. And I chose a very secular school, partly because I said I'll spend enough time in a Christian educational world that I'll use this to spend one in a different world and get that experience. But I had expected to do Greek and Hebrew eventually.
Yeah.
And I had an extra spot in my class schedule looking to fill something, and my undergraduate school taught Hebrew. And so I was like, well, I can get a start on it now.
Yeah.
And then that'll be an advantage to me later. And so I enrolled in Hebrew 1, taught by a female Reconstructionist rabbi in the spring of 2020.
That's wild, bro.
Oh, absolutely. And we got
Reconstructionist rabbi.
Not a lot of time in person before we were remote because COVID happened.
Yeah. Oh, okay. That's right. Yeah.
And it was a wild time. A lot of things changed. But 2 weeks in, I was absolutely obsessed. Yeah. I had so much fun. I was doing a homework assignment where you were reading about the two sort of flood stories that are repeated. One uses Yahweh and one uses Elohim. And it was an assignment for class.
Yep.
And, a rabbi instructor, secular school, and I just cried through my homework assignment because it was so moving.
It was beautiful to you.
It's just beautiful
the
story.
Language was beautiful. The
language and the story and just God's
it,
character. And I was like, how on earth could you take this? You're taking this class. I'm doing my homework, and I'm experiencing such spiritual depth through this. I was like, this is amazing.
And that's a further testimony that it's not ever about the professor or the class itself. It's just about the heart of the individual.
Yeah.
I mean, you're going to a secular school with secular professors. That's crazy to me to think that even though all of it's secular, you are finding life in it. And then it surprises me that on the flip side, you can go to a very conservative school with believing professors and then find nothing but death because the person is not going there for the right reasons.
I have a pastor friend who said the problem he had with his Hebrew professors was he thought they liked Hebrew more than they liked Jesus.
That's dumb, dude. That's hilarious. Well, it is true. I mean, the stigma of you went to cemetery.
Yeah.
That ongoing joke. That's always a joke, supposedly. It never makes me laugh because I'm like, that's a foolish statement. But yeah, I totally get it. I mean, I went to Azusa Pacific University. I don't know how familiar with it you are, but it's a pretty liberal school. There are some conservative professors there with conservative ideas, but mostly liberation theology and, the very liberal side of theology at this point. But I was finding life in the material. I was seeing the triune God. I was studying the Trinity for the first time. I was reading Wesley, even though I'm not a Wesleyan, but I was reading Wesley and enjoying the material and growing in my faith. So I just think ultimately it depends on where your heart is for the Lord.
Yeah.
And then just chewing the meat and spitting out the bones at the end of it.
Yep. So along that same logic, my wife and I both ended up in the classics department at Swarthmore,
Is that where you guys met?
We met doing some other student tutoring.
Okay.
But we took, so I started Hebrew then.
You're like, hey, girl, let me tutor you.
But so my wife and I and another one of our very good friends, we all took Greek together. We took a year-long Greek intensive. And she and I started dating the first week of Greek class. Mm-hmm. We took a year of Greek. Then we took a semester of reading Plato afterwards with the same professors. We had a year and a half of the same professor taking Greek. Mm-hmm. We started dating the first week of Greek. And I left our last Greek class a year and a half later to buy a ring. And so I told my professor, I was like, our dating has completely coincided with this Greek class we've taken with you.
You know what? That's amazing to me because I know you were a brokey back then probably.
Oh, yeah.
How would you even afford a ring?
I genuinely, I slid all of the cash in my wallet. I had the lady swipe both of my cards, like both of my debit cards, and then literally I had change. I was moving quarters across the desk to buy my engagement ring.
That's amazing.
And I was like, can you give me an extra like 5% off? And the lady, she hit nothing. And I'm like literally like counting out quarters. And I was like, could you give me, just $5 off? The lady was just holding staunch.
That's crazy. And yet, here you are, man.
Yeah.
That's amazing. How long you guys been married now?
3.5 years.
3.5 years. That's beautiful, man.
Yeah.
And how long you been here in Gateway?
I graduated May of 2023, and so we moved out here in August. So
2023.
a little over 2.5.
Oh, okay. All right. Sweet, man. Well, when you started your education, because we're here at Gateway right now, so when you started your education here, one of the things that I appreciate about you, and I still love this, is that you were intentional about the church that you chose to start serving at. And please correct me if I'm wrong, but it's a smaller African-American dominant church.
Yep.
Where someone that looks like you, right now, look at that camera right there. Someone that looks like you would not necessarily want to go to a church like that. And I love that. I love that heart. I love that passion. What was it that was a deciding factor for you to be like, I'm going to go to this church and serve and commit and, grow as a minister? What was that?
So I've never been able to church shop for any long period of time because I find it really hard to find a church that I can't love. And when I previously went off to college, I went to both times. I went to one church, and that was the first church I visited was basically the church I stayed at. And I was like, this is great. This is all I need. And so we got here. We visited one church, and it was a really great church. We enjoyed it a lot. But they didn't have a need for my gifts. They had like lay preaching rotation, and they were starting a sermons on Romans, and the pastor was excited about the languages and these different things. And I said, like, we could be super happy here, but they don't need my kind of gifts. And so we'll find someone who has a need for that. And so I found them through the job board at Gateway. They had posted they were looking for someone for youth to help out with some of that different stuff. And I called the pastor, and I called him on a Friday afternoon. And I said, hey, my wife and I are new. We're seminary students. We're looking to find a church to be a part of and somewhere we can minister. And he said, well, great. He said, I could tell you what we're about, or you could come out tomorrow, Saturday morning, be here at 6 a.m. and you just see it. And that was the conversation. We hung up. And I thought, I don't know what it is about this guy that he was just like, I could tell you, but get up at 6 a.m., be here, you'll see it.
Yeah.
And so they were doing a food ministry. I loved it. And they were giving out food and clothing. And so I got out there and was hauling boxes of food. And I had been there 15 minutes, like food on a forklift, not a hand truck, like pushing it and talking to everyone. And they were so welcoming. I texted my wife. I was like, you'll come to service tomorrow and, you can tell me what we think, but I'm sold. I was like, I love this place.
That's awesome, man. I love that heart. What you just said not too long ago, it's hard for me to go to any church and not love it. Like, that mentality is so rare. It's such a rare mentality to be able to say, I'll go to any church and just love them, and to commit to it almost immediately. because people do shop, and they shop hard sometimes for churches, almost to an idolatrous like end, to where if you don't meet all my needs and have all the right programs for my children, for every age and the youth and et cetera, then they won't go to that church. That's one of the hard things about church planting. I church planted for like 5 years, dude. And if you don't have the programs that people want, it's hard for them to be able to be like, yeah, I can see myself serving at this church. You know? So I love that heart about you, man. That's awesome. And I'll forgive you for wearing that Brewers tie.
It's Braves.
Oh, Braves. Sorry. That is not Brewers.
No worries. I'm too Baptist to root for the Brewers.
Yeah, I'll forgive you for that anyways. This is LA country. This is Dodgers or Angels country, so we'll forgive you for that.
And my in-laws are all big Giants, San Francisco Giants fans.
Yeah, we'll forgive that too. It's all right.
That's good.
Cool, man. So your passion is then Hebrew. That's the language that you're passionate about. What is it about the Hebrew language that you just love when you read it, that captures your attention? First of all, man, I have a hard time with Hebrew. I have a much easier time with Greek, but Hebrew is a hard language for me. So what is it about it for you?
Yeah, so I really enjoyed Hebrew. I was studying it. My junior year, the rabbi who had been teaching it retired, and the school. Well, and she retired a little earlier. They replaced her for 1 year with someone on a contract, and then they were going to just drop Hebrew. And I had all of my thesis, all of my honors preps, I had all these big senior year projects, and they were all about Hebrew linguistics. And so I went down to the dean and the chair of the department, and I said, like, I don't have a professor. Like, I can't graduate without doing these papers in Hebrew linguistics, and I don't have a Hebrew professor. And the chair of the classics department told me, he said, well, Bryce, he says, we have two problems. One of them is we don't have someone for you to do more Hebrew work. The other one is we're not producing any more intro Hebrew students. So he very politely said, if I just wait you out, like, this problem is going to go away. And so I didn't want that to happen. So I said, well, I'll just talk a bunch of my friends into taking Hebrew. And so I said, I'll informally offer to teach them Hebrew. And that really took my interest in Hebrew and my capacity with it and my passion for it to another level. And what happened there was I had to teach a class a very different way because these students, they were full-time students. They already had memorization. They already had charts. They already had exams. They weren't getting credit for it. I wasn't a PhD. So I restructured. I worked on a bunch of different things. And I taught a very different approach. For one semester, we did 1 hour a week, no homework, no assignments, no quizzes, no memorization, no flashcards. We just talked and read in Hebrew. And at the end of it, I had people over to my house, and we cooked a bear roast that we were given by a wild game ministry. And we read the story of Elisha and the bears in Hebrew.
Oh, interesting.
And I asked them questions, and they asked questions about the text, and they understood it because of the syntax and the discourse, and that they pieced the story together. And mind you, some of these students aren't Christian.
Yeah.
And my wife told me, she says, you cannot bring non-Christian students over who are weird enough to take Hebrew and then read this horrible, like this terrifying story.
That's the story of the young, like teenage children that call Elisha Baldy, right?
Exactly how old they are is unclear.
So, yeah, I'm guessing because it says
exactly
the children or whatever.
But that's the problematic part about it, is that maybe these are just little kids who insult Elisha, and then he has them mauled by bears.
Yeah, he like curses them and they're mauled by bears, right? Yeah. So what is it about that Hebrew story that they were able to see without like being off-put by the story?
Absolutely. So some great repetition of the roots. So one of the really cool things about Hebrew, this is one of my favorite things about Hebrew, is that it's got triliteral roots.
What does that mean?
So
don't do that to me. I don't know what that means.
So Arabic is another language that has the same feature.
I see.
So lots and lots of words in Hebrew have 3 letters that comprise a root. And we can pick whatever 3 there are for different things, and they sort of represent a semantic domain. And then you can transform the vowels in between those root letters and the consonants that go on before and after to get different meanings out of it.
I see.
So like a common one that people talk about is mem lamed kaf, malach. So you can get from that semantic domain, you can get melech, that's king.
Okay.
You can turn it to the feminine and get queen. You can also get a mamlacha. You could get a dynasty or a palace. As a verb, it can mean to rule, but the same root can also mean to cause to rule or to coronate someone. And so you can get a lot of different verbs, a lot of different nouns, and they're all related to this root.
I see.
That you can see very visually that this is being repeated. And so it means that related words often have shared letters more so than they would in English. So thematically related words in English, we know they're related because of the theme, like tie and loosen or something.
I see.
But the letters they use may be completely different. And that sometimes that's still the case with different Hebrew words, but within a semantic domain, often there's increased sort of parallel sounds and shape and structure. And so that really helps you see, and it gives the author a lot of ways of creatively structuring a narrative to bring out certain emphases and points.
I see.
And so that was just one thing that after, and these people had no more than 11 hours of instruction, and they weren't doing any homework, and they, no textbook. They were able to read the text and recognize some of these patterns and go, oh, that word order is different. Oh, and this idea is being repeated even though it's changed a little bit each time around. And that, for me, they understood the text better because they could read Hebrew. And they went home and they left, and I told my wife, I said, that's like crack. I said,
you're like, I'm addicted, I'm hooked.
I said, I will never not do this for the rest of my life. I said, that feeling that these people 10, 11 hours and they can read the Bible in a deep way better than they could before. I was like, that's the most wonderful feeling in the world.
That's awesome.
And so that's the story of my life since then, has been like chasing that high of how can I help people read the Bible better? How can we get into Hebrew? What tools and resources can I make so that more people would do that and be able to read it better?
So this is why your aspirations is to eventually earn a PhD. Don't know where, but eventually wherever the Lord leads you, hopefully a Gateway. But, I know that your aspirations are to be a professor of Hebrew or Old Testament, right?
So I'd like to get my PhD in Old Testament, partly just to say I need to be a lot better at Hebrew to be a better instructor. And that's a great way to have designated time under people who are really stinking good at Hebrew that I can work under and learn from and can get feedback on. Is this how I grow my understanding of language? I am really excited and passionate about a lot of non-traditional avenues for teaching. I work in Advanced Now, which does unaccredited, super flexible, affordable theological education all over the world.
Advanced is like here at Gateway.
Yes. I was doing informal teaching in that class because I wasn't hired as a professor at Swarthmore College to teach Hebrew.
Right.
And I've been teaching for the last almost 2 years now. Some of my in-laws. I tried to get a class together and rope in grandparents as my target audience.
You even created an app to be able to help people through Hebrew.
Yeah. So I'm really interested in doing a lot of Hebrew teaching that may not look like being a quote-unquote professor teaching an accredited classroom and a semester schedule. And part of that reason is that I think the constraints of a semester schedule and credit hours and those things, not that they're necessarily bad all the time, but they do have limitations on how you can teach. And there's certain things about language learning that make it very distinct, in my opinion, from other kinds of content. And Gateway's a great example. Most of Gateway's classes are 1 day a week for 3 hours.
Yeah.
I think adults can handle that for theology super easy. You give them a break, 2, 10, 15 minutes, come back in, go through church history, go through theology, go through ministry work. I think that works really easy.
Yeah, because it's mostly conceptual ideas, theologies is more about, not so much about memorization and repetition, but more about like logic and critical thinking.
And it's very conscious. And this is the problem that hits language students the first week is learning the alphabet has to become a subconscious association between form and sound.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah.
And that's what happens week 1 is it doesn't matter how much you want to learn it, you have to sleep on it. It has to soak in. And that takes time. And doing it for 15 minutes a day doing it for 3 hours a day, they're not as different.
Yeah.
Like, you actually get a lot of the benefit from a short period of time with a lot of repetitions that are spaced. And so I think that's a challenge for trying to do that in that kind of, even a 15-week pace. I was teaching in school other people who were sharp undergrad, full-time students. As I started working with like my grandparents, right, I find like just the pace that they want to go at and what's normal for their life and their work and other things is very different. And it doesn't fit into a semester schedule well. That doesn't mean it's not effective.
Yeah.
And so spending a longer period of time doing smaller assignments just works better. And textbooks are, if you pick up a Hebrew textbook, the chapters are designed explicitly or implicitly for a full-time student at the undergraduate or graduate level. And they're expecting a decent amount of hours of commitment each week to move forward.
Yep.
And if you get that spaced repetition off, then you start to forget chapter 7 because you haven't reviewed it because it's taken you 6 months when the author intended it to take 2 months.
Do not remind me. I still have PTSD from songs and repetitions of words and stuff like that. Aleph, bet, gimel, dalet, hey. So I'm over it.
Absolutely.
Okay, so I'll say this. Hebrew language, beautiful language. Obviously, Old Testament scripture is written in Hebrew. But I prefer Greek, man. Sorry.
80% of the Bible's in Hebrew. Almost all of the Bible's poetry is in Hebrew. And the thing is, my wife and I took Greek together. She took more Greek than I did. I after Plato, I was doing other stuff. She went on. She did the Iliad and the Odyssey. She was reading Homer. Very difficult Greek.
Yeah.
She was much better at Greek than I am. In the summers, we took classes through Southern and through New Orleans, 2 other Southern Baptist seminaries, and took Greek exegesis classes. And at times, despite her being a lot better at Greek, I could read the New Testament books better because there's so much Hebrew influence. And she would look at something and she would go, what are they doing? And I would say, that's a Hebraism. That's really easy. Like, they're doing that because that's how this Hebrew grammatical construction works. And so I say, like, there's a lot more Hebrew text. There's poetry. Like, there's a range and genres that you get in Hebrew text. Knowing Hebrew also helps you understand and go what's going on in the New Testament with Greek. And my stance is that Hebrew is actually an easier language to learn than Greek. The difference is Greek is much more straightforward.
Yeah.
And I think that's the distinction that I like to make. Greek, Western, the alphabet's a lot closer. There are a lot of things about it that make it a little more straightforward. Now, the forms get really unwieldy really fast.
Yeah.
But Hebrew's a little less intuitive.
Yes.
So.
Yeah. No, I definitely feel that when I took Hebrew. I felt every ounce of what you're saying, bro. I'm telling you, man, I have a hard time with Hebrew. Beautiful language. I wish I had a better brain to understand it because, I mean, to begin with, you're writing from right to left. So that already messes you up. And so you're also writing letters from right to left, which also messes you up. And then when you're reading and speaking it, it is a completely different language with different sounds and different pronunciations and, whatever declensions there might be, suffixes. It all works just differently than the paradigms of the Greek.
Yeah, it's not an Indo-European language at all.
Yeah. So if somebody were to come to you and say, why should I study Hebrew? What's like your go-to example in Scripture to be like, this is why you should study Hebrew?
So a scriptural warrant for that?
Yeah, whatever scriptural warrant, yeah. Or maybe just like, conceptually, like if somebody were to, I want to learn Hebrew. Why should I study Hebrew if I have it in English? I can read English. Why would I study Hebrew? Why do I need to know Hebrew?
I would vary that answer depending on who's asking. So if a church member asks you that, or if a pastor asks you that, those are different answers. But the thing that would be the answer for the layperson is also true for the pastor. And normally the way I go about it would say, like, so much of communication is not written. They say 90% of communication is nonverbal. I would sort of it depends on how you define that. It's not written. How you hear it, how you say it, the emphasis, the way the words fall, the contrast, the parallelisms, all those things contribute so much, not just to our understanding and the clarity and the emphasis, but also just the beauty and the understanding the progression, the flow. Why are they saying this and then that? How do these two things fit together? so much of that has been communicated by the biblical authors. It's not that they didn't write it down, they didn't communicate it, it's unclear, it's lost, you can't find it. It's that it's really, really stinking hard to translate. And so there's a lot of things. You can read there was a friend of mine, pastor, who did some training in his seminary education. They had them recite the Pledge of Allegiance and emphasize a different word every time. So I pledge allegiance to the flag, right? I pledge allegiance, and it'd go to the flag. and it's a great way to see how your understanding of emphasis in something you read or say is so important to how you understand what's going on. And the trick is, most of the time the way we read the Bible is we just try and emphasize all of the words all the same time. And it just doesn't work very well.
Right.
And it also isn't how human language works. That's not how you speak. You emphasize certain things, and it's only meaningful if other things are less emphasized. It's not that they're not important. They're playing a certain part in a sentence. And a lot of disagreements that we find in the church are, I think this word is being emphasized in this text, and you think that word is being emphasized.
Yeah.
And without having further data to say, here's why I think that's the case, it's really hard to resolve those.
Sure.
And so there's any verse you want to pick that there's a disagreement about, there's two camps at least, and those people are differing often on not necessarily an interpretation of what that word means, but just which of the words in that sentence is most important. And that's something you can get from structure, from parallelism, from just having a feel for what the language does that's normal.
Yeah.
Hebrew's a verb initial language most of the time. And what's really interesting about it is when we read Hebrew, like if you look at Hebrew in interlinear, you think the verbs are always being emphasized because they're at the front. Well, what you have to get to is, what's normal for Hebrew speakers? And then when they differ from that, that's really significant. So I think that's part of the sense and the feel that you learn is not just what are they doing and how is it different from English, but when you begin to read a fair amount of Hebrew text, you get a feel for what's unusual for Hebrew. And that's really significant. So when you really expect Hebrew to do one thing and it does something different, then it's a great opportunity to ask, why is the author doing that? And there's a lot of significance there.
Do you have maybe an example from Old Testament scripture where you see this pretty regularly? Or maybe there's a verse that you really enjoy, and then when you read it in Hebrew, it maybe transformed your understanding of it. Is there like an example of that you can kind of recall from the top of your head?
Yeah, I think I was doing a project in the early part of Exodus where Moses, the story of Moses, and Moses is shepherding the flocks of his father-in-law, Jethro. And there's a great narrative progression. And actually, Rosine, that Dr. Watson uses here, does a really good job of teaching discourse analysis pretty early on. And as a really good way for thinking through, when you read through a Hebrew narrative, you've got these vayiktols forms, this narrative.
Let's tell the people, what's a vayiktol?
Vayiktol, it's a narrative storytelling form where you've got a repeated verb construction that appears and it moves the story forward.
And it begins with a vav.
Yeah, and it's a vaya often in the sound. So you get a vaya this, vaya that, vaya this, vaya that. And you'll often get a long series of them. So you can look at a chapter
so
and
it's just progressing the story forward. That's all.
Absolutely. And when you read through biblical stories, you can see this, and they did this, and they did that, and they said this, and they did that. But that pattern gets broken at very significant times, and you can really see the shape of the narrative. And so that story begins with some scene setting. Now Moses, he was shepherding the flocks of his father-in-law, Jethro. And you read through the chapter before, and he flees off, and then you're like, well, what happened to this guy? Where is he? And then this new story is set up. And they're like, okay, now Moses. We're going to talk about that Moses guy. Here's what he's doing. And you get the background, and then it starts going in, and he decides to go acharei, the Hamidbar. He's going to go like behind. He's going to go after. He's going all the way through the wilderness. And you can see, well, what is the story setting up as background, and then what's the action happening by watching those vayiktols? When did they happen? When did they break? What's the insertion that happens? That's just one that comes to the top of my head. A few more may pop up. But there's all sorts of different things, and I keep a running note often when I'm in church I hear someone speaking or preaching or doing something, and they take a verse, and they take it to have one kind of emphasis, and I think, I don't really think that's what he's trying to say there. I think the emphasis is on a different point.
Because of the Hebrew emphasizes it within the structure of the grammar and the syntax.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that fits in with root words and parallelism. Sometimes the author really I was preaching through Lamentations. We talked about this some time ago. And there's the acrostic structure in Lamentations. And there's 5 chapters, and there's 4 of them that are acrostics. And that provides a really good constraint for the poetry that gives you as a reader, even if you're not super adept at Hebrew poetry, because you know the poetic constraints, it gives you some idea of what to expect. And then when we deviate from it, you know that's significant. Yeah. So chapter 5 has 22 lines, just like the rest of them, but it's not an acrostic. And so that's a different example where still, even just being able to look at the Hebrew and understand the poetic structure gives you some idea of, well, why is the author breaking the structure? They're doing something I wouldn't expect. And there you get to see word choice that sometimes I was preaching Joel, and there's different types of locusts that are listed out. And there's the hopping locust and the this locust and the that locust. Yeah. And some people make a big deal about, well, it's this locust represents this and this one represents that. And I think when you go look at that, you find it has the right number of words and syllables and repetition. It's a poetic device. It has emphasis. Yeah. But the emphasis isn't every one of these different types of locusts means their own thing. Right?
Oh, I see. Okay.
The emphasis is that we're hitting this locust over and over again. Yep. And Hebrew, because they have different words for different stages of locust development, they can use slightly different words to repeat the same thing. So they don't just have to say locust, 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 locust. I see. They can use slightly different words, which is a more creative way of reiterating and emphasizing that point.
And that's what you're trying to get at with the root word.
Absolutely.
Having different emphases. Yep.
And so then that just helps you realize, because if you look at that in English, you say, why do they use 4 different words for locust? You may say, well, each type must be something different and significant. Yeah. And I think when you look at that
at least in English, that's what most people would probably conclude. Yeah.
Absolutely. And say, why do they use these different words? What's different about them? And I think once you are reading, you may say, oh, this is being repeated, this is being altered for some other reason. That's not divergent emphasis, but is convergent emphasis.
Very cool. That's very helpful. I mean, honestly, I still have a hard time with Hebrew. But I want to love it. And honestly, hearing you, it does make me want to reconsider my perspective.
That's a win.
So I love that you're passionate about it. I need people like you. I'm a theologian. I am not a linguist at all. I'm still working on Spanish. And that's supposed to be the language I speak. But man, I appreciate you coming on, man. Thank you so much for sharing your passion. Any last word you want to just kind of share to any maybe aspiring linguist or aspiring Hebrew scholar or Old Testament guy?
I think there's so much. Recently, the next step I've been trying to take is I moved to doing my sermon prep with Hebrew text as much as I can. And I've moved and pushed myself, and I'm uncomfortable doing it. But I'm trying to take my sermon notes and my observations about the text and write them out in Hebrew. And they're bullet points. I'm not writing full Hebrew sentences. Yeah. I'm not going to go up in the pulpit with Hebrew notes. Yeah. But I think there's always a next step that you can take, and you feel uncomfortable to take it. Yeah. But once you start doing it, then it gets easier and you grow. And so I think that's encouragement that's been helpful for me. Instead of, if you're just using English, try and move up one more step. I use a reader's Bible, and when I got it, I thought, it just has vocabulary and no parsing. It has uncommon vocabulary. And I thought, I don't think I can handle this. But now that I've gotten it and I use it, then I feel good. Yeah. And so it's probably time I'll have to make the step where I don't have vocabulary help. And so there's a next step for everyone in doing something, and you always feel unready, ill-prepared to make it. But you'll grow a lot when you do.
Right on. Thank you, man. Appreciate you coming on, sharing your testimony, sharing your life, sharing your ministry. I'm praying for you, man.
Appreciate it.
You got some big stuff coming up ahead of you, man. That's awesome. Well, this has been Reformed Perspective. I appreciate you. God bless. We'll see you next time.